gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 304. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Hello, Saturn.
Yes, sir.
We did it.
Yay. What did we do?
We're here.
Oh. We didn't fall asleep yet. Yay.
We've accomplished this much. I took like a little shot glass of coffee as like a test to see like, will that keep me up through the second show?
Are you
but
sure
not
it
all
was
night?
coffee?
No.
You sure it wasn't like Jim Beam or something?
Yeah, I did a shot of Jim Beam right before the show. You know, I don't know that it'd make it any weirrer than it already is.
Right.
So it's probably fine. We don't have any housekeeping. We have other shows. You can go listen to them, et cetera, et cetera. My week, I went...
Very respectful to those other shows.
I went on a trip.
You did.
I went on a trip to Austin.
Mm-hmm.
I went and visited Andrew, went down to Austin, stayed for a couple days, played some board games, watched some movies. I watched that new Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah.
That was bad.
I've heard the opposite from some people, so
I know, it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to people and they're like, that was trash, or they're like, that was fantastic and everything I wanted.
I don't think I've heard that yet. So
I have. I've heard people be like, it's a great film. What I was expecting was people to be like, yeah, it's a pretty good video game movie.
Right.
I've seen people be like, no, it's a great movie. Like,
weird.
Just movie. I thought it was very bad. But to qualify my opinion, I like the old ones. So
yeah.
Obviously, I don't like good things.
But what is your take on the actual inspiration, the games that it is based on?
I don't like the Mortal Kombat games either. So I think maybe as far
take
as
that
Mortal
with a
Kombat,
grain of salt.
Yeah, I just live in opposite land where I only like the old movies. And that's it.
Gross.
So yeah, we watched
But just
that.
the first old movie, right? Not the second one.
No, I like them both.
Oh, no.
They're hilarious. They're so dumb.
But Christopher Lambert didn't even show up for that second one.
The second one has the skull face guy, and he's so dumb.
He's pretty dumb.
Oh, it's dumb. And Baraka is dumb.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so
That's
dumb.
pretty dumb.
But yeah, had a good time down in Austin.
That's good.
Drove around, went to comic shops and stuff. Played some board games and card games, and just had a good time.
How many Targets did you go to in Austin?
Oh, looking for that goddamn He-Man toy I'm after? Only one, but I almost got Andrew to drive me to a second one.
Andrew's a good friend. He would have done it if you had said it.
He would have, and I could tell, but I could also tell that he was like, I don't want to fucking drive around to Targets all day.
Yeah.
Like, let's hang out. Still tracking down all the He-Man toys that I need, and was trying to get the stupid Target exclusive one.
I checked the Target near me for you too, and the guy who worked there was like, "Oh no, it sold out instantly."
Yeah, it's getting like Wii levels of insanity.
Yeah, it's silly.
Like, because I was like, I can't find this thing, so I joined like a Facebook group of people that are like, we collect these new He-Man toys, and even they can't fucking get it. They're like, we stood in line for a half hour before the store opened, and employees took them off the pallet and karate kicked their managers and ran out the back door. Like, just crazy fucking stories. And so it's nuts. So yeah, still, I did end up getting one.
Oh, you did?
From eBay.
Oh, okay.
Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I took the extra money I paid a scalper on eBay and compared that to the amount of money I spent trucking around to different Targets, it probably would be equivalent. So I'm not that upset. I didn't pay like some insane amount of money.
Right.
It was just definitely more money than I wanted to pay for it. But yeah, my collection is nearing completion.
Yay.
I just need the Walmart exclusive flocked Panthor now.
Boy.
That I've already kind of just given up on that one because I've already got regular Panthor. Do I need a flocked one? I'm also still playing Yakuza. It's going well. How was your week?
So I have, aside from looking once for you, I've not looked for any He-Man toys. That's how my week has gone so far.
Well, what are you doing with your life? You're missing it.
I'm playing R-Type Final 2.
Oh, how is that?
That's good. It's good. It feels like R-Type. The first two levels are excellent. They're laid out beautifully to the point to where it makes you feel like you're doing better than you are, which is great. That's the kind of feeling I want to have in that kind of a game where I feel like my actions are making me look like a badass and not just clever level design.
Right.
And then I got to that third level and it's kicking my shit in. It's so hard. It got real hard real fast. And I'm playing on normal difficulty. I have 2 other difficulties I can drop down to, but the next one down is kids.
Oh no.
And below that is beginner.
You know what shmup had a kids mode and it pissed me off because it whooped my ass? Thunder Force, the Sega Ages Thunder Force. Is Thunder Force 4?
Yeah.
That came out on Switch.
Right.
I fired it up and it's like, and it's kicking my ass and it goes, hey, turn on kids mode. I'm like, all right. So I turn on kids mode as in for children.
Yeah.
And it's the same.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice a difference. And then in my head, I'm like, maybe they hate kids. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's easier.
Yeah, my first thought was, I bet kids would be better at this than I am. They have like that Twitch reaction speed.
Yeah, they got all the time in the world.
Right.
They're not old and near deaf.
Thanks. But no, it's good. I've been playing it on my Xbox. So I pre-ordered it from NIS America, and anytime that you get a collector's edition from NIS America, it always has the sticker on the front to tell you which console it's for. And if it's the PS4 version, it says for home console. And if it's a PS Vita game, it says for portable device. And if it's for Switch, it says for hybrid device. And I'd been wondering what this Xbox game would look like, because it's the first game that they've ever published on Xbox. And I get my R-Type 2 Collector's Edition, and it has the little sticker on the front, and it says, for home device, green. So
this is the Kmart version of reality, where it's, hey, what game console do you have? You want to play video games? I got home console green.
Yeah.
What do you got? I got hybrid device.
I can't wait for someone to finally tell NIS America what the consoles are actually called.
I like to imagine that they intentionally don't want to know. It's like when people go to say it, they're like, nah, I can't hear you. Like we just know it's green. Yeah. It's not. It's the whole thing is black. It's green.
But anyway, so yeah, it's good. I recommend at least checking it out. It's pretty fun. And then other than that, I was also just tooling around with some game streaming just to see how it is evolving, because I want to like new technology, but I hate that I can't
just make it so hard to like it.
So I was playing around with some Game Pass on my Chromecast and on my Shield, and it's working okay. It's working better than the last time that I tried it. Certainly better than it does on my iPad. And I was playing some Forza Horizon, and I'm really bad at that game. Yeah. And I do a race, and as I'm starting the race, it says, "We noticed that you've been failing your last several races. Do you want to lower your difficulty?" And I'm like, "Yeah. please let me lower the difficulty."
Yeah.
And then I still got 12th place.
Well, I think the problem isn't that the other people are so much better.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you're just driving bad.
I'm really bad. I'm just running into every wall.
I'll say, when I got it, because I got pretty into Forza Horizon, I'm still into it. Yeah. I'm just at a point where I sit and I play it for a little bit every week, and then I move on and I don't talk about it anymore. Right. But I'm still playing it actively. And it the first like 3 to 4 hours, I was like, how does anyone even fucking play this game? And then all of a sudden I hit like 3.5 hours and I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's just I don't know.
I did decide to do one race where I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to go like half the speed I want to go, and I'll take every corner beautifully. And I did, and it gave me a trophy for good driving. Yeah. And then I still got 12th place, but
I found like a 5-minute YouTube video of a guy that's like, this is how you turn in the game. So I was like, and he was like, do not brake while you are turning.
What?
I was like, oh, what? Like that was my big, you brake and then you turn.
What? Wait.
You brake, and if you brake while you're turning, you're going to lose your grip and spin out and run into shit. You brake before the turn, and then coast into the turn.
Yeah, I've been doing that. Yeah, that's what I've been doing, but then everybody passes me while I'm turning because I'm going so slow.
Well, because you're not very good at it yet.
Correct.
You got to get good. Obviously, you got to get good at it. I do like that even if you get 12th place in every single race you ever do, the game's still just like, hey, just keep going. Here's more stuff. Yeah. We don't care.
Yeah,
just
it's
keep
great.
Playing.
That's what I appreciate about it. I also, because it was worth some Game Pass points, I decided to spend a couple of minutes on Halo 5, which is the most time that I've spent on any Halo since the first one on the original Xbox.
Uh-huh.
And it's weird, and it's really fast-paced, and I did not know what was going on.
It is weird and fast paced. That's actually kind of one of my complaints with Halo 5 is it feels so fast that it doesn't feel like Halo. It feels weird.
I kept dying the second that I spawned in.
Well, that happens to me anytime I play an online game.
Yeah. I did have the most deaths, but I managed 8 whole kills, which was exciting. I was very impressed. It was the least of anyone, but it was 8. I needed to get 10 to get my points. So then I started another match, and halfway through I got my second kill, and it popped up that I had gotten credit for it, so I immediately disconnected. So I'm sorry to anyone who was on that team, but I wasn't really helping you anyway.
I've realized with time that part of the reason I do like Halo is because it's just slower, you know.
Yeah, I'm not good at slow
other
either.
FPS games. Yeah, I like that it's not like sprinting speed all the time.
Well, I can't aim anyway, so when it goes really fast, at least I can use that as an excuse. I guess
that's true.
I can say, well, there's a reason.
This just shows you how much you suck at the game.
Right. Also, I decided since I was already trying some Game Pass, I should also try some Stadia just to see how it is.
Oof,
and honestly, the quality of the streaming is better, but I'm not going to pay them for their service. So I decided I would pay for a game. And I was like, well, I already own Trails of Cold Steel on 3 platforms. I should buy it again. So I bought it just to learn that it's not fully translated.
I'm sorry.
They left part of it in Japanese for some reason.
A heavily story and text focused RPG that they didn't even translate all the way.
Don't worry, they got the story. It's just the descriptions of what all your combat abilities do.
It's like you personally prioritize how they're going to translate that game to piss me off.
Unfortunately, I've already played it on other platforms, so I know what all this stuff is.
Right, so you're fine, but still.
But I see it, so I'm just like, come on, guys. You've already published the same game on 3 other platforms. How did you screw this up? But there's no way to communicate with anyone about it, so they'll never know. And it's on Stadia. No one else will ever notice it. So
maybe you could pay for a plane to do some skywriting near their corporate office.
Yeah, just go over to Google and be like, hey guys, can you please tell one of your publishers on Stadia to do a thing?
See, it's already too long.
Yeah.
That's too much for skywriting.
Right?
It just needs to be fixed fucking game. Just it's cheap, effective, they charge by the letter.
Oh,
Saturday.
Shit. Can I have one of those banners behind it with the picture of the bad translation?
No, but they have middle finger emojis you can put on it.
Perfect.
Let's knock out some news.
Yes, sir.
First up, a fan-made Firefox plugin allows users to revisit the classic PlayStation Online store to purchase PS3 and Nvidia games from their PCs.
And it works. I tried it.
What?
It works. It's great.
You would think that Sony would want to make it easy and possible to purchase games.
No, that's not what they want.
And what's confusing is that it is easy and possible to purchase games. They've just locked the front door and been like, no, not right now.
Right.
Like they don't, like what?
And the thing is, there are several games that work on the PlayStation Vita that will not come up on the Vita's store. Like if you search for them, they're not there. If you go by category, they are not there. But if you purchase them through the web interface or through a PS3, then you can go back to your Vita and it's on your download list and you can play it. And so this gives people a chance to still buy those games.
Humble Bundle will cap charity donations at 15% beginning in May. Additionally, I believe they are removing the charity slider bar entirely.
Yep.
Are they not?
I believe so.
So fuck you, Humble Bundle.
Yeah,
I guess.
I guess I'm done with you.
I mean, the being able to increase your charitable donations was the whole reason to go to Humble Bundle over the many, many, many other bundle sites that often have better bundles, especially since IGN bought Humble Bundle.
Yep.
So that's unfortunate.
It's a mess.
Nintendo Switch is now the 6th best-selling console of all time in Japan. Presumably the top 5 are the PlayStation 5, according to Sony.
No.
Beating the Famicom and hot on the heels of the PSP.
Yes.
So that's PSP being there at all definitely shows you how different that market is.
Yeah, I believe the top 4, if I remember right, were PS2, DS, and 3DS maybe? Or maybe it was GBA. Anyway.
Xbox and Square Enix announced that Dragon Quest Builders 2 is getting a digital release for Xbox One, and it will be on Game Pass.
Yes.
I'm excited about this. I didn't buy it, and now I get to play it on Game Pass.
Yeah, it's so good. I'm already ready to play it a fourth time. It's so good.
I can't wait to quit it after a few hours.
You know what's
it's going to be so
You know
fun.
what you're going to hate the most? I'm going to warn you right now. So there is one character that when it speaks, its dialogue appears on the screen for some reason about 1/10 the speed of any other character's dialogue.
All right, I quit the game now. I am going to preemptively quit the game.
And you can't skip it either. You just have to sit back, put the controller down, and let it talk for a second. And then when it's done, the game is great again. And I hate it so much. Every time that character's text shows up, I'm like, oh, fucking God, it's this again.
Dreamcast Castlevania Resurrection Beta has now been leaked on the internet for your playing pleasure.
I'm so excited.
So go get it. I haven't downloaded it or played it yet.
I did download it, but I didn't play it yet. It's sitting there waiting for me. I'm so stoked.
Pretty cool. Nintendo updates Super Mario Party over a year later to add online support, which was the biggest criticism of the game. Well, actually, it's probably second biggest after forcing you to only use Joy-Cons and making a significantly smaller game compared to earlier Mario Parties. You get the point. It should have been there on day one.
Fortunately, they caught it just in time for when everybody's trapped in their home. Oh, wait a second.
Shit! We missed the pandemic! Epic says they won't port Fortnite to xCloud/Game Pass because they see it as a competing service. Shocking no one.
Right.
Epic.
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth II's 24-karat golden Wii is selling for $300,000 by a private collector.
You can go buy it right now. It's on eBay still, as of now anyway. It might not be by the time
What's weird is that's less money than that one graded Super Mario game sold for, isn't it? Like, you can get a 24-karat gold Wii used by the Queen.
We don't know that the Queen used it. She just owned it for a little bit.
For less money than a Super Mario Brothers game.
Which is more common than this one-of-a-kind golden Wii.
This is one of a kind. It's covered in gold, so presumably the gold is worth a good chunk of money.
Right.
And it was used by the Queen of England. Those are all big selling points over, it's the Mario. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Mario, but what is happening in the investment world? Nintendo has filed suit against Team Executor head Gary Bowser. I believe Bowser is facing 11 felony counts.
That sounds right.
In the courts. So we'll see.
It's unfortunate. I mean, we knew that Nintendo was going to be doing these kinds of things.
Right.
So.
Right. Sony to, quote, aggressively invest in first-party studios and third-party exclusives during the PS5 generation, coming hot off the heels on them saying that they're going to heavily invest in a movie streaming service and that they're going to heavily invest in some other stuff.
Yeah.
Mobile. Also, they're going to simultaneously...
Also, they were going to cut down on staff at one point.
Yes. Too. They're going to heavily invest in everything.
Yes.
Ever. Except not being shit.
Well,
Google added a search bar to the Stadia store. Yes. Google, that company that owns Google, now has added the ability to Google in their Google service.
Wait. Only in the web interface. If you're using mobile, you still cannot search in the Stadia store.
Jesus Christ. Doom Eternal's in-game toys are being made in real life for a mere $42 a piece. Oof. I think I saw MSRP was $34.99. They went up for pre-order at the usual toy places. You know the ones. Don't ask me. And I think they're around the $40 mark each. And for little posable vinyl figures, like, that's cool, but I'm not going to pay. Like, if they were like $10 a pop, I might get 2 or 3 of them.
Right.
But for $30 to $40, oh man, no thank you.
Right.
Microsoft cuts their Windows Store purchases, their take from Windows Store purchases, to 12%, which is probably the most boring news of the year, but also probably some of the most impactful.
Yeah, that could leech some business from Steam, which is their intent, obviously.
Isn't Steam 30%?
I believe so.
That's less than half
Yeah.
of Steam's cut then.
And Microsoft also recently made it to where you could release things through the Windows Store that were not Universal Windows platform. So that means that regular old games can be published through there now, and that the publishers can get more of a take on it. So that could steer some people.
Oculus offers a version of the Quest 2 that doesn't require a Facebook account.
Oh, really?
For an additional $500 up front and $180 a year for people that sit around saying things like, they already have my data. What's it worth anyway?
It's worth
to them, it's at
$180 a
least
year
worth
plus
$180
$500
a year
up front.
and $5,000 up front. If you think these companies are not only making money off of you, but making huge amounts of money off of you, that's the reality of the situation. Now, and you know what? At least they laid it out on the table and they said, hey, if you don't want us to make our money, this is about how much we make.
Now,
so you
now they are
that.
claiming that this is a developer unit. This is if you're wanting to develop for the Oculus and you don't want it to track every user's data, since it will presumably be used by multiple people. That's the purpose of this one. But really, they're basically saying, well, if you don't want it to attach to Facebook, this is your cost.
Man, that's like whenever you see, I've seen some cell phone companies, smaller ones, be like, like one of them came out with a completely made in the USA phone.
Right.
And it was like $3,500 for like a 6-year-old tech and a phone. Yeah. It feels like that.
Yeah.
Bobby Kotick agrees to cut his salary and bonuses after pushback from investors. Finally.
And now he'll only be able to afford $4 billion this year.
Jesus. Team at Toys for Bob, who worked on Crash 4 and the Spyro Reignited trilogy, have all been let go. God damn it.
Thanks, Activision.
What the fuck, man? Both of those games celebrated. Very well done. Spyro Reignited trilogy, I've praised it recently on the show many times.
Yep.
For being a very well done remake for what companies should strive to be with their remasters.
Right. And now they're all gone.
I'm starting to really, because I had said previously that I was going to pick up Diablo 2. I was like, Activision's been a little okay lately. Maybe I'll kick them $30 or $40 for Diablo 2. I think I may retract that.
Yeah.
And I know it just comes as a blow to Activision, who definitely notices me as an individual.
Yeah, they were waiting for your specific purchase.
That must have been it. They're like, Justin didn't tell us not to fire all the Toys for Bob guys. So, yeah, I was just going to do that. Early reviews of the Atari VCS are starting to surface. It is a device that you can do some computing tasks on.
Yeah, the first headline that I read on it was that it has an identity crisis, and it's not sure what kind of device it wants to be.
You don't say that the Atari VCS doesn't know what the fuck it wants to be.
Right.
Well, it's okay. It's Atari. They've never had a history of devices that don't know what the fuck they want to be.
Never.
Really, at this point, that's kind of their MO. I think they've had more devices that didn't know what the hell they were doing or what they wanted to be than they've had devices that were clear cut.
At least since the Jaguar, maybe including the Jaguar.
Yeah. We missed this news back in February. That's been a long time. Comcast's Peacock streaming service, which is still a dumb name, is teaming up with Konami to make a Frogger game show. Are they going to hit people with cars?
Oh, I hope so. I really hope so.
You can't do that. That's illegal.
No, they'll figure it out.
Just welcome to the Thunderdome and just run people over.
Oh my god!
I know that
and make them step on alligators and shit. Oh, it'd be great.
I know that it would never be this, but in like my idiocracy brain, I'm imagining it's just like a big pile of cash on the other side of a freeway, and they just film it. They just like figure it out. And they just
go at it, Frogger.
Just a live camera feed of people sprinting across a busy freeway.
Yeah.
It's got dark. Despite previous assurances to the contrary, Doom Eternal has added paid DLC skins. That seems weird because they were so clear about how there'd be no paid DLC, and then
that's unfortunate.
Seems like it's
and
paid DLC,
and it begs the question: is this a Bethesda decision or a Microsoft decision?
What bothers me is when Eternal came out, they said that. They said, we're not going to do it for a year.
Right.
Or they said, we're not going to do it. And I said, all right, I'm going to give it a year. If in a year you haven't done any of that shit, I'll jump in on it. I ended up not having to because it was added to Game Pass. But otherwise, I would have bought the game and then still been upset.
Yeah.
So ridiculous. Super Mario 64 has now been ported to web browsers because why not?
Sure.
You know, basically web browsers are their own operating systems these days. So who cares? Let's just go crazy.
Right.
And finally, Konami will not be appearing at E3. I know everyone fully expected them to be there.
All right, boys, take off your clown paint.
Definitely thought for sure. Who really was like, yeah, Konami's going to be there?
Well, they announced it previously.
Did they? Is that why they're saying they're not? So they've changed their mind.
Yeah, E3 had announced when they said that they were going live this year. They said partners, including Konami and et cetera,
See, I didn't hear.
Will be there. And then Konami came out today, actually, to say, well, we thought we were going to be there, but we're not quite ready. We're still working on things. Maybe next year.
Well, they threw a dart at the dartboard a few months ago when they announced it, and it said video games. Then they threw another dart, and it said not video games. And they were like, so they had to call and cancel.
They tried to throw the dart again, and this time it landed on Frogger Game Show. And they were like, oh, shit. Well, I guess we're doing that now.
Well, it just landed on kill people with traffic. And they were like, what do we do with that? And then someone's like, we have Frogger. And they're like, get back in the games room, which is just a room full of torture devices for all the people that work on video games at the company.
It's just a room full of Wii U development kits for some reason.
I'm just imagining Konami as like the shittiest knockoff Two-Face Batman villain that like can't make a decision unless it uses a giant stupid dartboard. And it's nonsensical.
Nice.
Let's get into the topic at hand. This week we're talking about Sunsoft.
Yes.
Who's probably best known by Western retro gamers as that company that done gone made Blaster Master. They also made other great games and are even still around today, which I didn't know.
Yeah, they're technically still around today. And you
know,
the fact that they're still around today may end up being more tragic than you think.
Well, yeah. We do want to give a special thanks from the show to game historian Stefan Ganser,
I believe,
for being basically the only person on the internet to have researched Sunsoft as a company.
Yes. When I was doing some research on Sunsoft, I found his research, which started with basically him saying, I had to do this because no one else had ever researched this before.
Yes.
And as I started doing other research, everybody just referenced back to him.
So special shout out.
Yes.
Also, thanks to the Internet Archive for keeping old articles up and available.
Right.
It's such a necessary resource
Yeah.
just for this show, and we don't cover anything worth a damn.
Right.
People are they're having to preserve real, actual history for some people.
Yeah, and weirdly, this guy's research on Sunsoft has been pulled down from the website he published it on. And so I had to go to the Internet Archive to find it, and that's extra weird. So I don't know if maybe he wanted it pulled down for some reason, and if so, I apologize for digging meticulously through it. But, you know.
People just hate Jason Frudnick and his Frog Fred. That's right. The problem. Which I only remember because it was a Patreon name.
Also, we did a whole episode on Blaster Master where we covered that, too.
I don't remember any of that. Are you sure?
Yeah, I didn't remember either until I looked it up.
We really did Blaster Master?
Yeah. When I was talking,
because I was just thinking the other day, I was like, maybe we should do Blaster Master. This is a good game.
Yeah, when I was looking up notes on this topic, and I mentioned it in our Discord chat with our excellent Discord participants, I was like, I don't even think we've done a Sunsoft game, and somebody was like, you did Blaster Master. I was like, no, we didn't do Blaster Master. I think we talked about it, but we didn't do it. They're like, no, you did, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it's right fucking there.
At what point are we going to be in the middle of researching a show and realize we're referencing our own material from a previous show and be like, oh.
That'll be N64 Volume 12.
I thought it was weird that they had our same names. That was strange.
Right. This is what we get for editing Wikipedia after every episode to make us look right.
As far as... Stop telling them my secrets. As far as Biographical Info, it was originally founded as Sun Electronics Corporation on April 16th, 1971, founded by Masami Maeda in Conan City, just outside of Nagoya. Conan City? I just want to say Conan.
I think it's Conan, but I like Conan City better.
Conan City! You probably know them for Blaster Master, Journey to Silius, Batman on the NES, Genesis, TG16, and Game Boy, and Return of the Joker on the NES and Genesis, Fantasy Zone on the NES,
In Japan.
In Japan, Super Fantasy Zone on the Genesis, Waku Waku 7 on the Neo Geo, which is a great, weird fighting game. Right. The infamous Mr. Gimmick, Euphoria, The Saga, and possibly Trip World, although I doubt it.
Yeah. The Trip World is great, by the way.
All things you may know.
It's such a weird fucking Game Boy game, and I recommend you try it.
They make good games.
Yeah. They made good games.
Yeah. Tell me about the early history of Sunsoft.
So, again, at this point, it was still just Sun Electronics. And the original purpose of the company was to produce microchips for other companies' electronic equipment. They were basically like a smaller Japanese Intel. I would possibly closer to ARM than Intel. They just made little microchips. And their first foray into gaming was building pachinko machines, like so many Japanese companies. That was back in May of 1974. They built their first pachinko machines that sold in Japan. And that line of pachinko machines that they started in 1974 is still sold by Sun Corporation to this day. They still make new pachinkos of that same line. The first arcade games they made were actually not even published by them. They were contracted by another company called Gifu Toki to make some breakout clones. And so they made GT Block Perfect and GT Block Challenger. And one of the developers of these games was a guy named Kiharu Toshida, who would go on to become the manager of Sunsoft when it was essentially founded in 1985, and he became the president of Sun Corporation altogether in 2008, and I believe he is still the president of Sun Corporation.
I was about to say, that's a big gap. He's been there forever.
Yeah, so that's going back to the 70s. If he's not still there, he recently stepped down. I couldn't find too much recent information because, man, it's just depressing. And they continue to make just clones of arcade games, stuff like Space Invaders and Centipede and Galaxy, and just clones of those into the early 80s. And most of those clones they made didn't leave Japan, but there were a couple that were published overseas by Taito and Sega. And other companies that brought over Japanese games.
Clones back, everyone was doing clones back then. Like it was big money and it was easy.
Yeah, and Taito and Sega, if they didn't already have a clone of that game and they needed a cheap one, they'd just pick up that weird one that Sun company made.
Right.
And one of their first original games that wasn't blatantly a clone. I mean, it was still basically a clone. Was a 81 Defender style game called Funky Fish, which could be one of the very earliest Q-em-ups. And I am sad that we didn't encounter it when we did our Q-em-ups episode, but that was also 6 years ago, and neither of us knew how to research then.
It's true.
It's
true. That was back in the era when we'd sit down. You'd come over to my house, and I'd go, what do you want to do a show over? And then you'd be like, I don't know. And then we'd be like, controllers.
Okay, let's talk about control. What controllers do you remember? I don't know. We'll figure it out on the show.
The very idea of doing the show without a half dozen pages of notes is terrifying to me today. Like, if you were just like, hey, Justin, I don't know, Castlevania 4, go. I'd be like, oh my God, what?
But that's how we did it then.
I think Konami made it. I don't know. Like, I would just be scared and upset.
Pretty much, yeah. But we're not used to it anymore. Back then, well, it was also a different format show then. It was basically just the two of us bullshitting for an hour, and we just happened to pick a topic to bullshit about.
I got news for you, Saturn. It's still kind of shit. Still just us bullshitting.
Don't tell them our secrets.
Guys here listening to us bullshit. That's the difference.
Yeah, that's what's made it better. We got Guy now.
Yes,
he can judge our bullshit in real time. So yeah, after that, their first successful original game was Kangaroo, which was inspired by Nintendo's Donkey Kong. They still hadn't really made anything original yet. And Kangaroo got big enough that Atari picked up the rights to distribute it internationally, and it is actually known for people that did play games back then. It was one of those games that you would see. And then their next successful game was also picked up by Atari for international distribution, which was Arabian in 1983.
This one I've heard of.
Yeah.
I think this is the first one of their games I've heard of.
Yeah. It's very similar to Nintendo's Popeye because, again, they hadn't figured out how to do anything original yet.
Right.
And again, Atari ended up publishing it overseas, and it ended up on every home console over here at the time. Every microcomputer, every home console had Arabian, and it had Kangaroo because Atari was publishing them.
Yeah, because our Atari had an identity crisis and just put everything on everything.
Yep, exactly. And eventually they did turn away from the arcades and towards home consoles in 1985, and they became one of the first third-party publishers on the Famicom. And when they did, they turned hard away from arcades. They still published a small trickle of arcade games, but it wasn't like companies like Capcom and Konami that were still...
Where it was this kind of... They're two tent pillars.
Right.
Or tent poles,
right,
not
right.
tent pillars. They're two tent poles, which is arcade and then home console.
Right. Whereas Sun pretty strongly steered towards home consoles and just kind of still supported arcade a little bit.
Yeah.
And so when they started supporting the Famicom, they adopted the name Sunsoft. And that's when we start to recognize them more as what people recognize Sunsoft as. And because there weren't too many third-party publishers yet for the NES, most of them would have to get their cartridges and their chips made by somebody. Fortunately, Sun Corporation made microchips.
What?
They knew that shit. So they were able to completely...
if you're looking for a Galaxian clone or a microchip, we're the guys.
Right. So they made their own cartridges from the beginning. And their cartridges were distinct among the early third-party companies because there was a Sunsoft logo embossed in the plastic of every cartridge. And it's giant if you look at any of their old Famicom games.
And really long-term, a lot of Famicom cartridges looked very different from each other. Famicom games looked like a big pack of Skittles.
Pretty much.
And then NES games just look so boring by comparison.
Well, ironically, Sunsoft games were all white. So they did not fit in with the Skittles very well. But
they don't have they have white Skittles and damn, I know there's a white Skittle.
Probably.
I'm gonna look it up.
What letter is or what color is the S on the white one?
Oh shit, gray? I don't know. It's gray on everything else. They're not white.
Right.
It's like a grayish. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm gonna Google white Skittles.
But yeah, so they the cartridges do have a big Sunsoft logo on it, and it's goofy looking, but it is distinct. It helped them stand out, and because some of their games were good quality, it helped people find the rest of their games because that logo was so obvious.
Right.
And because they had that background in making microchips, they also kind of used that to cheat the system a little. So instead of just using Nintendo's generic standard chips for everything, all their games used custom chips in Japan anyway. They had to convert them to standard cartridges outside of Japan, but
didn't some of their US ones still have I swear Return of the Joker has some special chips in it,
as well as Mr. Gimmick and Euphoria, which both came out in Europe using a custom chip. So real late in the NES life, they did start using those custom chips outside of Japan, but the entire time in Japan they used those custom chips. And their first game that they put on the Famicom was Super Arabian, which sounds like an enhanced version of Arabian, but it's not.
Let me guess. It was not.
No, it's just the exact same game, but with super in front of it.
Excellent. Done.
Yeah. And it sold way better than they expected it to. It was kind of just a test release from Sun.
Well, was this pre or post Mario?
This was just barely post Mario.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if Mario is not yet a known quantity, then they were buying nuts and milk. They'll buy anything.
Yeah,
they were just looking for titles for the Famicom. They're like, give us any games.
I found a review of it from a Japanese magazine that was translated into English, obviously, and they were basically saying Super Mario Brothers is an enhanced game on top of Mario Brothers. This is not Super Arabian. Which, that's pretty brutal, man.
Jeez. Most reviews back then were just like, it functions. And they're like nailing them about title terminology.
Right?
Wow.
Right. So, they started making Famicom games. They're doing pretty well. And for some reason in 86, when they were looking overseas to consider, releasing stuff outside of Japan, instead of establishing a Western branch like most of the companies did at the time, they found this little tiny arcade conversion company called Kit Corp. all they did was buy old arcade machines and convert them into newer arcade machines. That's
arcades, the business they exited just a few years prior.
Yeah, that they mostly exited. They still had a little business, but not much. And they find this American company in Chicago called Kit Corp, and they buy it and they rename it to Sun Corporation of America. And so that's now their Western branch that will publish all their NES games. And the guy that ran it, that they bought it from, was this guy that used to work at Atari named Joe Robbins. And he remained the president of Sunsoft America until 1989. They just left him in place. They were like, well, we bought your company. Now you're going to run our American branch, which is weird.
Yeah, that's a little strange.
Yeah, but it worked. I mean, they did well on the NES, so clearly it was a winning strategy. Throughout that year in Japan, they released some other titles. Another big one was Atlantis no Nazo, which gets a lot of praise in the retro gaming community for being a game.
Atlantis no Nazo is I would say it's celebrated.
Yeah.
Obviously more so in Japan.
Right.
But it's I notice it like I know they did a Game Center CX on it. Like it has a good amount of recognition.
Yeah. And it also shows up on lists of like best games that didn't leave Japan and stuff like that. And it was advertised as being even bigger than Super Mario. It did not review as well as Super Mario.
Saturn, they meant physically. The cartridge was 1 millimeter taller than Super Mario.
No, they meant it had more levels.
This is what, I liked my version better.
But it did. It did have more levels. You can't say they were lying.
The way we rated games back in the day. Like, well, this one has more levels.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's terrible. But it's more levels. So 8 out of 10, I'm guessing.
This one has 10 guns, and that one only had 2 guns.
Less guns, so less game, so less numbers. Yeah. 6 out of 10.
That's pretty much how reviews worked in the 80s.
I could have worked at EGM in the early 90s.
I knew math. Then they moved on to the FDS, and in Japan, they heavily focused on the FDS for a number of years. They released a point-and-click adventure called Dead Zone, which came out in late 86, and it actually had voice synthesis technology in the game.
Yeah.
And allowed it to speak some of the dialogue in there, which voice synthesis on a 1986 console game.
That's insane.
That's bizarre.
Also, Dead Zone, wasn't that the name of that movie Christopher Walken was in?
Based on the Stephen King novel.
Was that it?
No, it's not based on that. But
no, is it called Dead Zone?
It was called Dead Zone, yes, but it's unrelated.
What? I have that movie on VHS. I watched it. It sucks.
I love that movie. Did you ever see the Saturday Night Live sketch with Christopher Walken where he parodies that movie?
Yes, it's great. It's better than the movie.
It really is. It's so good. Anyway, during this time, Sun was also, while completely in bed with Nintendo, was building up a good relationship with Sega as well. They started helping convert Sega's arcade games for Western audiences since they bought this little Western arcade company.
Right.
So they started publishing some of Sega's games in the West. And they used that relationship that they were building up with Sega to get the rights to start publishing Sega games on the Famicom. In Japan, they published Fantasy Zone 2, and Afterburner 2. They also published Alien Syndrome and Afterburner, which also got brought over here to the West by Tengen as NES games. So, starting to see some Sega stuff on NES thanks to Sunsoft, which was weird.
I still have that Tengen Fantasy Zone.
Well, Tengen's Fantasy Zone is not made by Sunsoft. Tengen made that completely on their own.
Maybe that's why it's one of the worst versions of it.
It is. If you look up the Japanese Famicom version of Fantasy Zone that Sunsoft made, it's actually better than the one we got over here.
Well, that sucks.
Yep.
Gosh dang it.
So they finally actually release NES games outside of Japan in September of 87 with conversions of Midway's Spy Hunter and Namco's Sky Kid. No original games, just publishing other companies' stuff at this point. Spy Hunter never actually was released in Japan on NES, so it was
weird.
It was one of the rare Western exclusive games, and it sold over 1 million copies on the NES.
Holy shit.
which I owned Spy Hunter.
I did not own Spy Hunter.
It's an okay. It's not a good port. It's okay.
I didn't love the arcade game to begin with.
Oh,
but I didn't discover it until MAME. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's not a great port. It's an okay port. It's a fine port for 1987.
I was already playing Grand Theft Auto by the time I was playing Spy Hunter, so I was like, I have better fighting and shooting and driving games.
Yeah, but does GTA play the Peter Gunn theme on repeat?
No, thankfully it does not.
So later in the NES's life, in 88, or in the Famicom's life anyway, Nintendo of Japan started to put those same limits that they had in America about the number of releases that publishers could put out every year and still be officially licensed. And so Sunsoft did the same shit that a bunch of the Western publishers did, and they formed...
Basically all of them.
Yeah. They formed Tokai Engineering in 88 as a method to get around that limit. And one of the first games that Tokai put out was Metafight, which was known over here as Blaster Master.
Oh, boy.
So that was not even published by Sunsoft in Japan. And
apparently we did an episode on it.
Yeah.
It's episode 147. I have literally no memory of this. And what's weird is that if you asked me, like, Justin, do you know enough about Blaster Master to do like an episode of the show on it? I'd be like, no. So obviously I've forgotten stuff about it since we did that episode.
Yeah, that was only like 2.5 years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the thing is, Metafight didn't do that great in Japan. It did okay.
I'd always heard that it was mediocre at best.
Which I learned from you on that episode.
Hey, there you go. But once again, referencing our own research. You're like, oh, really? Interesting. Who told you that? Oh, me? Well, you see, I was kicked in the head by a mule last year.
Right.
So I don't remember any episode before 200.
You don't remember most of the episodes since then either.
That's true.
But no, obviously it did really, really well over here. And we talked about that at length, apparently, maybe 200 episodes ago. Who knows? So because of the massive success of Blaster Master in the West, Sun Corporation decided to fire Joe Robbins as the president of Sunsoft USA. Apparently this was a thing. I was doing some research on this, and apparently several Japanese publishers in the 80s hired Western presidents to run the company just because they weren't that familiar with Western business operations.
Right.
And then as soon as they became successful, they then fired them and replaced them with their own people. So basically,
once they figure out the business, they're like, all right, now you can go.
Yeah. And then they put in their own person to continue to run the Western business. And apparently several of those companies started to see a dip in sales because of it, because they took away the Western management. And so did Sunsoft, because 2 years later, they brought back Joe Robbins as the president.
Oh, Sunsoft.
Yeah, it's not the best decisions. But during those successful years, they had several original titles like Blaster Master, but they also kept doing ports of other companies' games. They ported Williams arcade game Xenophobe. They did Activision's PC game Shanghai.
Did they do the NES port of Xenophobe?
They did.
That game sucks.
It really does.
That's a bad... I bought it because it had like a xenomorph on the cover, and I was like, hell yeah! And I got home, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
Have you played the arcade game?
No, I don't want to.
It also sucks. It's a great port of a bad game.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but they also did a lot of licensed games. They became known for their licensed games, and several of them were good quality, high-quality licensed games, but also they did Fester's Quest.
Fester's Quest is so fascinating to me.
It's weird.
Because people need to remember, it came out before the Addams Family revivals of the 90s.
Correct. This guy that did this research, this Stefan Ganser guy, he went out and interviewed a lot of the people that worked on Fester's Quest.
Yes.
And so I got to read a lot of his interviews, and I recommend people go out there and read these because they're fascinating.
It would be like if they're like, hey, what if we did a Hong Kong Phooey game? And they'd be like, fucking why?
Yeah. So this guy, Richard Robbins, who is the son of Sunsoft America president Joe Robbins,
yes,
he says he had a dream where he envisioned a game called Uncle Fester's Playhouse that was a mix of the 60s Addams Family and Pee-wee's Playhouse.
And the Addams Family, because what's even more fascinating is that the Addams Family was not even very popular of a show.
Well, it was pretty popular in syndication in the 80s.
In syndication, yes, it was, but it
not
only
when it
ran for a
originally
couple
aired.
seasons.
Yeah.
And it was like basically forgot what the fuck.
It was-
all right. So
It was still on the air when I was a kid in syndication, so it was still airing regularly, but like in shitty time
Right.
slots.
right, it was a filler show. It
Yes.
was a show that was like that's better than watching nothing and having to deal with real life.
Right, or infomercials.
But it was, and then everyone liked the Munsters more.
Now, you take that shit back.
And I feel like the Munsters was probably more. I'm just talking out my ass now.
Yeah.
Like we used to do in the old show. I feel like the Munsters was probably more successful.
Possibly, I always preferred the Addams Family to the Munsters. I'm just going
Right.
to say that.
Right. I mean, I did too personally, and then especially after the wonderful '90s reboots.
Oh yeah, I loved those movies.
Which were great, but then Fester's Quest, it'd be like making a video game for the monkeys in the late 80s.
Oh man, that would have been great.
Like, no, it wouldn't have. We have Fester's Quest. We know it would have been bad.
Well, Bandai made a Gilligan's Island game in the 80s.
I had that.
I know,
was
it's
gonna say
awful.
have, but I sold it. I streamed
okay.
it. So Richard Robbins, son of Joe Robbins, has the dream to mix Pee-wee's Playhouse and Uncle Fester.
Yeah. And he pitched the idea to Sun Corporation of Japan, who immediately shot it down. And he managed to change their minds by going... Okay, so first of all, Charles Addams was still alive at this point. He hadn't passed away until the 90s.
Yes.
But he had already lost the rights to everything related to the Addams Family. His ex-wife had taken all of the rights.
Uh-huh.
So Richard Robbins goes to Charles Addams' ex-wife, who is also a very fascinating figure. If you look her up, I think her name is Barbara Barb, but for some reason she went by the pseudonym Lady Colleton.
All right.
It's just the weirdest shit. And reading all these interviews is just bizarre. Anyway, so Richard Robbins goes and hunts down Charles Addams' ex-wife. She says it's a great idea to make a video game based on the Addams Family 60s TV show.
Mixed with Pee-wee's Playhouse.
And so he goes back to Sun Corporation of Japan and says, well, the widow gave us the rights. And they're like, oh, well, then do it. Now you have to. And so they assign the team that made Blaster Master to make a game based on the Addams Family.
No, it's not based on the Addams
It's really
Family.
not.
It's based on Fester.
Yeah.
Specifically Uncle Fester.
Just Uncle Fester. Like other people show up.
And it contains first-person exploration segment.
Yeah.
Why? The gun shoots around the enemies. Oh my god, I have so much to say about Fester's Quest.
Yeah, it's got so many issues. And you know, they a lot of the issues that we had, they fixed in the European version.
It's fascinatingly bad.
Yeah, so they took those people from Blaster Master and let them work on Fester's Quest. And the actual design for the game, like, this is what the game is going to be, and it's going to have first-person segments, and it's all going to be overhead, and the gun is going to shoot in a parabola for some reason. All that was designed by Sunsoft America. They would just tell the ideas to the team in Japan via fax.
Oh, no.
And then the team in Japan would mail them a prototype, and then they would fax them back about what they wanted changed.
Oh, no.
And
excellent. A 60s horror-themed television show mashed up with Pee-wee's Playhouse, ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System, designed by Americans and programmed by the Japanese people via fax.
Yes.
How could this go wrong?
Right. And so this is an actual quote from the article that Stefan Ganser put out. He says, when the game was released, it quickly got a reputation for being very difficult. Menheim completely takes responsibility for the fact that when the player dies, they must start from the beginning. When they tested the game, they had a different debug code which enabled them to jump to different parts of it and save. Therefore, he simply forgot to mention in the development document that a save or password system should probably be implemented.
I like that they're so dedicated to making this stupid fucking idea that they're like, no, we're gonna go to the ex-wife and get the rights, and then they're like, oh, I forgot to fax them and ask them if they put a password in the game. Like, it's in stores, and they're like, oh, oops. Like, did Uncle Fester design it too? Because fuck,
it's just the weirdest shit. But the game sold well.
Why?
So there's Fester's Crest. However, a licensed game they put out that was good and is well received was Batman.
Yes,
which was
Batman.
Which was, of course, based on the 1989 film with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson.
I don't know about based. The title screen was based on it.
Oh, we'll get to that. So, according to the designer, Yoshiaki Iwata, only some still photos and basic story elements of the film were provided, and they were told to just make up the rest and not worry if it fits in with the movie's story.
I mean, thankfully, Batman fighting the Joker fits pretty well with most, but
Right.
they lucked out. Okay.
Yeah. And during the development of the game, the graphic designer, Yuichi Ueda, he said he used scenes from the comic books to flesh out the game's story in addition to these photos they were given. Mm-hmm. And here's a quote. He says, "I often use the comic book Batman for the cutscenes, only to be scolded from Warner Brothers. At the time, I wasn't aware that the film and comic Batman held different copyrights."
Oh, man.
So
I'm just imagining Warner Brothers scolding a Japanese game developer via fax, inevitably.
Probably, yeah.
You big dum-dum.
Right.
Don't you know?
And apparently Warner gave them two requirements. Batman
Yes.
does not kill people, and Batman does not drag his cloak on the ground while walking.
Huh?
That was the only two things they were told they absolutely had to adhere to.
Doesn't his cloak drag on the ground when he walks?
I think so. Maybe not when he's running.
I feel like I remember. I'm Google imaging. I feel like I remember Sunsoft Batman.
I think while he's in motion, it flies behind him, if I remember right.
Does it? Oh, see, now I'm not. I don't know. I feel no. It does not drag on the ground.
Yeah.
It very nearly drags on the ground.
But
they
does
got
not.
that correct.
And of course, the handheld game would also be made by them in 1990, and that would be their first Game Boy game.
Yes.
And also another fun thing that I read about the stupid Batman game while I was researching all this. Apparently, the team at Sunsoft Japan, when they pitched them the idea for Batman, they were like, "This is a bad idea, and I don't think we should do this, and I don't think it'll sell." And they finally convinced them, you have to pay Warner for the rights to this. This will be worthwhile. We'll make some money on this.
Yeah.
And so they get the rights to Batman. And then a few months later, months before the game released, the movie came out. And one of the executives from Sun in Japan flew to America, and they took him to Times Square. And there's just Batman logos everywhere in Times Square because the movie just came out, and the guy looks around and he says, "Oh, I see what you meant." and then the game got delayed until the very end of that year. So it was like a 6-month delay between when the movie came out and when the game came out. So a little bit of a mix up there, but it's fine. It came out and it did ridiculously well.
And it's a good game.
Yeah. And there was also an interview with the woman that did the advertisement for it. And she said that like Warner shot down all of their original footage for the ad. And they finally, she's like pitching things. She's like, "Well, Batman needs to be there." And they're like, "You get this much footage of Batman." And finally she says, "Well, can you at least have Batman like grab the game box?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Fine, we'll give you the glove. You film the scene."
Yeah.
And they get the Batman glove from the Batman suit, but it's like junior Mrs. size.
Michael Keaton, he had tiny hands,
Right.
so
they said they had to find somebody's daughter that could fit in this glove. And they had like one take at it before they had to give the glove back. And if you look up the commercial, you can see it. It looks stupid now that you know how tiny the glove is, but
oh my gosh.
anyway, moving on. In 89 is when they started supporting the PC Engine, where they also ported the Batman. It was a completely different Batman game, but they did release Batman on it. And then in 1990, they started supporting the Genesis or Mega Drive, depending on where you are. In fact, Sunsoft was one of the first third-party publishers to break with Nintendo's rules of that time and publish games on competing consoles outside of Japan. Mm-hmm. Sunsoft was publishing Genesis games under their own name without even trying to hide it from Nintendo.
Yeah.
And Nintendo just kind of let them.
The thing I've learned about Nintendo's rules in the this era, the NES era, is that they just kind of played favorites and selectively enforced what they did and didn't feel like.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they very much played
all
favorites.
these companies making subsidiary companies. Capcom never did that, did they?
No.
Weren't they the golden child that just got away with as many games as they wanted?
Pretty much.
A half dozen Mega Man games.
Yeah, pretty much. I think they did go over the limit a couple of years, but no, they never. Not that I can remember. I don't think they ever released anything under a different name.
Yeah.
So yeah, and at this point, Sunsoft's doing incredibly well, especially in the West. They are just can't keep games on the shelf. Batman and Blaster Master are both doing phenomenally. And Sunsoft in Japan is working on some pretty big games like Return of the Joker and Mr. Gimmick and Euphoria. And so at some point in late 1990 or early 91, the Sunsoft of America staff was told that they are relocating from Illinois to California, and also that there would be no more game development coming from Japan. And no one seems to be on record as to why. But almost all of the staff that worked on all those hit NES Sunsoft games, including the ones that were still in production, had either been fired or left the company by sometime in 1992.
All right, then.
And many of them went on to form the company that would later become Nippon-Ichi Software or NIS. So that's weird. That's a weird little branch there.
We quit now.
Right? And I can't find if they were pushed out or if they quit, and none of the, this guy had several interviews with several of these people, and none of them would go on record as to what happened there. Just, that's when I stopped working at Sun.
It sounds like one of those things like you hear from these bigger corporations with these smaller companies under their umbrella, and they're like, "Oh, we're restructuring, you're gone now."
Right.
But they owned themselves outright.
Right.
I mean,
it was just very bizarre. And there was no changes in staff at the American branch. All of them stayed.
Yeah.
They just moved from Illinois to California. None of them were fired. It was only the Japanese programmers and developers that were gone.
Very weird.
And the games that were still in development did continue. So again, Batman, Euphoria, Mr. Gimmick, all of them were highly lauded by fans. Of those, only Batman came out in the U.S., Return of the Joker. Euphoria and Mr. Gimmick both came out in PAL regions. And those were very late NES games. I want to say they were 92 and 93 in Europe.
Yeah.
And all of those, like we mentioned earlier, used that specialized FME7 chip that Sunsoft made, which is expensive to produce. So not only were they late NES games, but they were expensive late NES games. So it's weird that they even made the choice to publish them outside of Japan. Right. But they did. And Joe Robbins would, for the second time, leave Sunsoft in June of 92. They tried to keep things going by obtaining the Looney Tunes license from Warner, which they had a relationship after Batman. They did lose the Batman license at this time, though, so apparently it wasn't that good of a relationship.
Maybe that's why all those Super Nintendo Batman games are so fucking terrible.
Yeah, none of them were Sunsoft. That was all different
Holy
companies.
shit, they were bad.
Oh, yeah. Some of them were Konami.
Oh no!
But during that era, when they were releasing these Looney Tunes games and making games for Super NES and Genesis and Game Boy, they were just using outside developers, sometimes Western developers, sometimes Eastern developers.
Right.
The last,
because they didn't have anyone left.
Right. Yeah. The last Japan developed action platformer from Sunsoft's golden age was Trip World, which was a Japan only game on Game Boy, which again is excellent, but never came out outside of Japan and was just kind of the end of the era.
Yeah.
And
well, let's transition into the decline of Sunsoft, and without making it too depressing, we'll just try to kind of fire through most of it.
Oh man, it's sad.
Because it's rough.
Yeah. So
without assistance from the developers in Japan, the quality of their output dropped quickly.
Oh yeah.
They occasionally had a hit with ports of other people's games. But they never quite reached the heights they'd hit during the 8-bit era. They were never the same for the most part. Attempts at a second win were mostly fueled by licensed properties, the occasional original title like Arrow the Acrobat or Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel.
Everybody remembers those, right?
No. Did we do Arrow the Acrobat?
We did not.
What did we do?
Not that.
It had a bat in it.
I don't know what you're talking about with the bat.
It was like a Super Nintendo, like an action platformy, top-down, bat-based game. You threw a hat. Oh, no.
The fuck are you talking about?
No, it was a game. We did a show on it. Fuck. There was the Blaster Master sequel on Genesis. It was made by Software Creations. It was not as loved.
No.
At all.
No.
In the West, Sunsoft continued to mostly put out licensed games through the mid-90s. Sunsoft Japan shifted to simulations, mahjong, ports.
Yeah.
Occasionally they had good stuff. There was Albert Odyssey on the Super Famicom and Saturn, Waku Waku 7 on the Neo Geo, which is a great game.
Right.
But they were few and far between.
Oh, yeah.
In the late 90s, Sunsoft US tried to regain some footing by becoming a publisher of budget RPGs on the Game Boy. And they obtained the Quest 64 license.
Yep. After how well Quest 64 did.
And they were like, yes, we need this. This is what we need.
Right.
They also reprinted Square's Final Fantasy Legend games and Final Fantasy Adventure.
Yeah, that's weird.
Which is why you have these Sunsoft printings of those, which that is strange.
Yeah.
When Japanese developer Human Entertainment went out of business in 99, Sun Corp purchased the rights to the Clock Tower franchise.
Yep.
And they teamed up with Capcom to release Clock Tower 3 on PS2.
Yeah.
Which is all they ever did.
That's the only thing they've ever done with Clock Tower, which is
ever.
Well, they re-released some of the old ones like on PSN or something, but that's it.
By the 2000s, Sunsoft's output had become almost entirely mahjong games, pachinko simulators, and dating sims that never left Japan.
Mm-hmm.
In 2009, Sunsoft acquired the entire library of Telenet Japan, including the Valis series.
Yep. This was post the Valis porn era.
They later sold the library to City Connection, who has since sold the library to a company called Adia.
Yeah, poor Telnet Japan.
I guess we'll have to do porn, and then they just get bought and passed around the industry. Sunsoft famously licensed the Blaster Master franchise to Inti Creates to make Blaster Master Zero in 2017, which has spawned 2 sequels of its own. They are all very celebrated games.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And despite all of this, the Sun Corporation of Japan continues to do well in their non-video game business.
Yep.
And Sunsoft is technically still alive.
Yes.
The occasional retro re-release or budget digital-only game will come out from time to time under the label, including a 2021 Switch game entitled House Cleaning Survival.
I looked it up on the eShop.
How bad is it?
This looks so bad.
Oh, no.
Like, I have seen some budget titles in my day, but oh, man. What are you doing, Sunsoft? What is this?
So as far as legacy, they definitely were a well-known and successful company in the 8-bit era and released highly praised games.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see much of a legacy beyond kind of Blaster Master.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They also released very technically impressive games.
This is true.
Very good soundtracks.
Right.
They very much took advantage of the console's hardware. Their specialty chips gave them very, very impressive titles.
Absolutely.
For the time.
Yeah. But and then it just ended.
And then we're done.
Yeah, and
that's it. That's the company.
I really want to know what happened there. Why they just decided that we were done with everything and fuck it.
It has to have been some executive decision where they're like, look, we're doing all these specialty games and we're doing all this shit. Right. Why don't we just license stuff out instead of developing? Or they must have been it has to have just been a cost thing is all I can think.
At that same time, there was just this sharp divide between Sunsoft Japan and Sunsoft everywhere else, where everywhere else was getting these weird Looney Tunes games and stuff, and Japan was getting mahjong and dating sims.
I bet you what happened was someone at Sunsoft Japan finally played Fester's Quest. And they were like, shut it down. Call them. Send them a fax and shut it down. Like they were just...
That would do it, yeah.
Nope. Done with it. Just
they got whose permission?
A big fax that's like, we fired everyone.
It's just a fax.
Go to California.
It's a fax just showing the projectiles from the plunger going right around the enemy with just a question mark around it.
What happened?
What did you do?
So as far as final thoughts, I mean, they made Blaster Master.
They did.
So they are good. Batman on NES is great.
Yeah.
Mr. Gimmick is
yeah.
a very cool, very impressive game. They have so many cool titles.
Yes. Like
under their belt.
So much of their late 80s to very early 90s output is not just good, but also technically impressive.
The Genesis Fantasy Zone is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They just did a lot of really cool work, and then they just fucking
and then they noped out
doing that.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate. And it's kind of one of those things where you see a lot of companies that start out not making video games and then transition into video games. And for all the ones that then stay in the video game space, there are plenty that just, for cost reasons or whatever, just decide to kind of get out of it.
Right. And I can I can definitely see the Sunsoft was not the kind of company that wanted to chase that continually increasing development cost. Like even Clock Tower 3, they were like, we have this horror property. Hey, Capcom, you guys know how to make horror games, right? Can you just do this?
Right. Please. And they're like, yeah, we were going to make like a half dozen Zelda games for Nintendo, but they didn't want them, so I guess we got time.
All the staff left. Okay, if we just reuse some Devil May Cry code?
Yep. So that's Sunsoft.
Yep.
What
a tragic ending, though.
A lot on more on Fester's Quest than you'll ever get from us otherwise. Do not ask for a Fester's Quest episode. It will not happen.
That is as close to a Fester's Quest or Sunsoft Batman episode as we're probably going to do.
So I feel like we could do a Sunsoft Batman one day. Well, I don't know why I say one day like it's this massive like undertaking.
Well, maybe if we like lumped in all of the Sunsoft Batmans.
I would do a whole episode just on how much I hate Fester's Quest and how many hours I played it thinking, surely I don't understand something basic here. Obviously, I don't get something, and that's why it's bad. Nope. That must be why it's bad.
And if only.
Well, what's not bad is our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/retrowarriors, and it's not based on a poorly received 60s horror television show that only did well in syndication.
Our patrons would never forget to include a password feature.
It's based on our wonderful patrons, such as the following people that made this episode, including Keith Reynolds,
Kevin Meyer,
Luke Saracen Clark,
Mark Schwickendioff-Meyer,
Michael Hawes,
Michael Winters,
Mike Rotondo,
Mr. Jiggyfly,
Neon Rocket Ship,
and Norman
are all wonderful patrons that make this show possible and get cool things, like uncut versions of this episode where Saturn complains about his phone for 16 minutes.
My bad.
Awesome. That sounded more aggressive than it did in my head. Like uncut episodes where Saturn won't shut up. Fuck. Didn't mean for it to come out that way. It's a feature. You can get it.
And you get to hear us bitch about Uncle Fester's Quest 2 weeks early.
There you go. You could have already heard it in the past. Which is where that game belongs. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.